And hello, friends. We welcome you to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Television. Chapters is the show that profiles authors, editors, and publishers in West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. I'm your host, Eliot Parker, and it's great to have you with us. We are talking about a new collection of literature called Feminine Rising, Voices of Power and Invisibility, and we're talking to that with the curator of this collection and one of the contributors. Andrea Fekete is the curator and the collector of this anthology, and we're talking with Tuesday Taylor as well, who's one of the contributors who has something in this collection that we'll be asking her about here shortly. And Andy, welcome back to Chapters. She joins us as a native West Virginian. She's the author of the historical fiction novel Waters Run Wild. She has one poetry chapbook, I Held a Morning. Her poetry and fiction have appeared in such publications as Borderlands, Texas Poetry Review, the Kentucky Review, the Smithfield Journal, and others. She also has a contribution to the anthology Eyes Glowing on the Edge of the Woods, Fiction and Poetry from West Virginia, which was published in 2017. An excerpt of her newest novel, Native Trees, was a finalist in Still, the Journal's 2019 fiction contest. She earned her MFA in creative writing from West Virginia Wesleyan College and her MA in English from Marshall University. So, Andy, welcome back. It's been a long time since we've seen you. Welcome back to the program, and Tuesday, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
So, this anthology is excellent, and we'll talk more about it as we go today, but I would encourage anyone to get a copy of this and read it because there's so much good work and powerful words contained within these covers. But I understand that there's 70 women from 12 different nations that contributed to this book. So how did you go about finding these women, and what was it like kind of pulling all of these different contributions together?
Well, I started with an idea for an anthology of essays and poetry. Usually people start with a publisher, but I worked backwards. I had the idea because I had some things take place in my life that made me feel powerless. And throughout my life, I've always dealt with that, with art. You know, how to gain a sense of control over your life, to take things inside of yourself, reassemble them into something that makes sense, put it out in the world, stand around and look at it with other people and have a conversation about it. Learn to understand things that you've survived. I didn't want to make an anthology about victimization, though. A lot of women anthologies focus on that, and I had the idea of I want other women to tell their stories and to get whatever it is they have on the inside out, whatever that may be. And so I thought, how am I going to do this? I don't really know a whole lot of people, you know, famous or big name people, so I thought I'll just get on the internet. So I made a website and put my mission up, and got a lot of really horrible work for a long time. I mean, but then I got lucky, and after a while I had so many emails coming in from women saying, I have this poem about my life as a mother, or my life as a daughter, or my life as a worker, or this story about sex, whatever it was. And I was overwhelmed, so I had to get my friend Lara Lillibridge to come in and help me sort the emails, and it took us quite a long time, but we were soon inundated by more work than we knew what to do with. And it's mostly women from the United States, but we represent 12 countries in the anthology.
So as you were getting all of these submissions, how did you go about sort of categorizing them or determining, you know, what are ones we're definitely going to use, ones we might use, ones we're definitely not using? How did you go through that process, and how did Laura help you with that?
Well, it's actually kind of funny. I wasn't prepared for this question, but the answer is pretty amusing. I actually had folders in my email that were really professionally titled, things like, I kind of like this, this is great, and, you know, stuff from men. We had a lot of men submitting work about what it's like to be a woman. That was interesting. So they weren't living as women. They were just, you know, cisgendered men, however you pronounce that. So I had various folders, and I would send all of it to Lara, and I would say, here are the categories, you know, I kind of like this, and we would just, and she lived in another state, so we did it all by email. So she would type in her reaction to the poem underneath it, and then we would go back and forth that way and just have conversations, and we changed each other's minds quite a bit. Like, she would love a piece, and I would say, and then she would kind of draw out what was special about that piece, and I'd fall in love with it too, so.
Good. So from the time you got the idea to do this till the time you got a draft of Feminine Rising together, how much time went by?
Oh my gosh, we started in 2014. with the website, and posting on Facebook groups too, by the way, which is a terrible idea. Don't read the comments, as they say. It took us years. It took us from 2014. I think we finally had a draft. I think it was 2017. Forever. So it took a long time. This was a lot of work, and we didn't have a publishing company guiding us. It kind of developed organically. It took forever.
Very good. So Tuesday, I know you've got a contribution to this collection. So tell us a little bit about what your piece is about and why you got involved with the project.
Well, I believe that I was chosen because my poem talks about being a little girl with an uncle who lived his life as a woman in the 80s and 90s in Appalachia, which is never spoke about. And the experiences I had with him, about him putting on makeup and pantyhose and pasties and going drag shopping, and how that was so crucial for me to be a woman. And I also believe in this area we have a lot of stigma that says that we're homophobic and these things, and that was never my experience as a child, seeing my uncle live his life as a woman in Charleston, West Virginia in the 80s and 90s. It was the complete opposite. So I was very pleased. I actually wrote this poem when I was 23 years old, and it would make people uncomfortable. I was told not to read the poem. Well, it never came out and said, don't read it, but it was, this poem makes people uncomfortable to hear. And it was very liberating for me because my uncle passed away when I was in the 8th grade, and when I read it, I get to be with him. Those memories are very special to me.
So if he heard the poem being read today, what do you think his reaction would be?
He would have a few. His first reaction would I can't say because it's
He
cursing.
was really funny, so she's probably filtering right now.
Yes. It would be for filth. That was a big thing. For filth, girl. That would be his response. And the second would be, you better sell it. That would be his. That was another one, which, depending on who he was talking to, it had multiple meanings. So he would be very, very, very pleased. And so would his mother, my grandmother.
Very good. Excellent. One of the things that kind of emerges, or one of the central questions that is really answered in this anthology is, when does your voice ring its clearest? And I think, Tuesday's obviously rings its clearest through her poem about her uncle, but there is a clarity that emerges in all of these different pieces, I think, from the different writers. And I'll share in just a moment one of my favorite pieces from the collection. But is that something you were looking for, Tuesday, as you wrote, that moment of clarity? And Andy, was that a stipulation that you were really looking for? Did that something just emerge as you start reading all of these different contributions?
I actually posted a long, specific list of things I was looking for. It wasn't, I should articulate that. What I actually wrote was a list of questions, and one of them was, when does your voice ring its clearest? When do you feel silenced due to your gender? Have you ever been a hero or protector or warrior? Have you ever been oppressed or victimized? Like, tell me what it's like to be a woman. You tell me, you define it for me. And so women did. They answered the question. They sent us stuff. I didn't set out with the answers to those questions. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. A lot of anthologies do that. Publishing companies will say, well, I have an idea for an anthology about women and anger. And I didn't do that. I just wanted to know what they wanted to say. And Tuesday's one of the only contributors I specifically requested work from. There's only a handful, very small handful. And I had read her work and seen her perform, and her poem, Lipstick and Earrings, which is about her uncle who helped raise you, right? Mm-hmm. It just moved me. I was like, this is amazing. This poem about gender and the influence of, he didn't call himself trans.
No, he at all.
But that unique experience of him helped raising her, and his influence on her as a female, and her idea of what that means. I loved it, and said, can I have this poem?
It seems like that's where your moment, your clarity of voice comes through, is those memories of him and mm-hmm. describing what that was like, and it seems like it gives him power today, even now that he's no longer alive. So
I feel like this poem is. I'm so thankful that Andy liked the poem, because I'll be honest with you, I was like, you ain't gonna even like this poem, because she was like, well, Tuesday, let me hear the poem. And I was like, nah, it's
Yeah, she sent me like, how many did you send me?
like 4. I think it was 4. And that was the one that was the one I was most reluctant to send. But I'm really thankful for it, for the opportunity, because especially with right now the climate of the country and what's going on, and a lot of labeling and how people feel and how you should act or see. My uncle, we called him Uncle. You know, it was just not my voice; it's his voice, and he has speaking parts within the poem, and still to this day, there's times when I'm getting ready for something and I have to dress up, or I have to put on lipstick, or I have to do something. I'm thinking of him, and I'm like, oh God, that's not gonna work. Like, I can hear him like, nah, you got too much leg showing. Like, so it makes me feel good, because other little girls can read that and understand. Not even your mama and your uncle's gonna tell you to sit with your knees together, okay? And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And this collection is divided up into different sections. You've got on resistance and roles. You've got a section on the body and sex, a section on love and leaving, a section on family and heirlooms, which I really liked. I thought it was interesting what people wrote about as what they consider heirlooms, which was, I'm sure, different for everybody, but I really liked that section. And then on violence and survival. And I wanted to ask you about ending it with violence and survival. I know that is certainly, when we think about power and invisibility, that is certainly something to think about. But in terms of arranging those stories that way, why did you arrange them that way in terms of those subheadings, and your comments on ending it with violence and survival?
I thought we ended it on late life and death, but I could be wrong. We have a section, but I could be wrong. We went through so many drafts, to be honest. I could pretend like I remembered that, but I don't. It's been about over a year, but we actually argued about in what order the sections should be. Me and my co-editor and our female publisher, we fought about everything, because, you know. And my argument was about, I didn't actually want to end in an expected way. I thought we ended with late life and death, but we had a whole argument about it. I was like, I don't want to go with, pregnancy and birth number 1 and late life, and I didn't want to go chronologically. I kind of wanted to just go with whatever I felt, grabbed the reader in a way that, like, we kind of went for an alternating effect too, like a short form and then a longer form and then a short form. And some of the sections were so powerful, like so emotionally eliciting. You don't want to have violence right next to, leaving, and then have all this horrible abandonment and pain. I wanted to really focus, like I said, a lot of women anthologies focus on victimization, and I didn't want that. I wanted it to be, something beautiful, and then maybe something gut-wrenching. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then something hard to look at, and then something maybe a little bit more uplifting. That's why we have love and leaving.
Very good.
Of the prior to the leaving, we have all the happiness.
The happiness before the sadness comes
The happiness before the sadness. You have to have that alternation. I don't know. It's the categories developed completely organically, though. It was a really nice surprise.
Yeah, very good. One of my favorite pieces in the collection was Carol Glor's Working, where she writes about starting working illegally at 14, working at Woolworth's.
Yep.
The manager told me not to hold the boxes too tight, or I would squeeze the milk from my boobs, and just this whole misogynist, sort of sexist way that the manager viewed her.
Yeah. Very demeaning.
Yeah, and what struck me, going back to what we were talking about a moment ago with Tuesday and you, Andy, about voice, is that there's just such a frank, open, this is what happened kind of experience to it, not sugar-coated, not massaged in any way. This is where I was, this is what happened, this is what he said, this is what he implied.
Yep.
And that was the first piece that I read out of your collection, and I started thinking, I wanted to see if all of that was still present in all the other works, and it is. Just a very, this is what happened, this is when it happened, this is who was involved. And I think when we look at Power and Invisibility in your collection, it comes through that just the honesty and the way that the stories and the way that the pieces are constructed. There's no hint of anything being left out. It's being told exactly as it happened.
They're very brave. Extremely brave women. We have a woman from Harvard, her essay, Ellen Canaro, her books on feminism are actually still being taught since the 1980s. Can you believe people like that sent me their work? I don't know. No offense, Tuesday.
Yeah, you're fine.
I mean, I'm really just amazed at how just fabulous some of these women are. And she had an essay called Unspeakable Memories, Harvard in the 60s. And it's about her sexual harassment in the 1960s as a student at Harvard, which I guess it was pretty unusual to be female at Harvard in the 1960s. And it's just completely she's not afraid. She's very brave to speak the truth about the situation. And every piece, they do have that in common. Extremely brave women.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tuesday, and certainly an example of that. Amy Hudock wrote the foreword. Mm-hmm. So who is she, and why did you ask her to write the foreword?
You know who that is.
I do.
Yes, Amy Hudock. Dr. Amy Hudock is one of the first women to introduce me to women's writing. When I was 19 and came to Marshall as an undergrad, and I was a journalism major, and then my professors talked me into majoring in English, and I ended up in her class, and it was Southern Lit, and it was Southern women writing, I think. And anyway, she introduced me to all these different types of women's voices that as a child growing up in a holler, I didn't know existed. I'd never read Native American women, Black women, Appalachian women, and she just opened my eyes to a whole new world. And then she asked me to be her intern. She was starting the Women Studies Certificate Program at Marshall. This is 1998. Oh, I dated myself. And oops. So I worked for her, and she moved away to teach at UC Berkeley and then other schools. Now she's a dean in South Carolina. But she was one of the biggest influences on my life as both a woman and a writer. She changed my whole life. And growing up in West Virginia in a tiny holler, I never thought anybody would care about anything I ever wrote, you know. And Dr. Hudock, she showed me I was wrong. And then I don't know. I love her so much.
Yeah. She did a great job with the foreword as well. I want to ask you just sort of a big picture question as we think about feminism today. We think about voices of power and invisibility. Mm-hmm. And I guess we could address this to our region and our area, but maybe more nationally or even globally. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like we're making progress? As you read these stories, as you talk with these women, as you get to know their experiences, mm-hmm. Are we making progress, or are we stuck in the 1980s and 90s, or are we going backwards? So where do you all think we are if we had to put a measurement on it or a gauge on it today? Where do you think we are?
It depends on which aspect of female life that you're talking about. You know, like Carol Gore's Working is about work. You know, there's all kinds of aspects of female life that have changed and evolved. But one thing that a lot of women from North America forget about is that there are some countries where women and men will be put to death for speaking against their government, for writing a poem, for singing a song. There are governments. There's one. I have a writer friend named Gonzalo Baez who says, you know, where he's from, you know, they'll shoot you if you stay out past curfew. I mean, it depends on who you ask this question. Asking me as a woman from the United States, we have come a very, very long way since the 1970s when it was still legal to rape your wife. Mm-hmm. You know, since you know, when my mother was a working woman in the 80s, I have a great deal of respect for my mother's bravery in that. It wasn't cool. Mm-hmm. She was really given a hard time, and women were given a hard time in the media. Women were, you know, if you got pregnant, you know, you remember the episode of Murphy Brown, I think in the 80s or 90s, mm-hmm. and it was a big deal that she became a single mom. It was so stigmatized. So of course things are just improving a great deal. There's always more room for improvement, right? How could advancing the lives of women ever be a bad thing? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I completely recognize that not only as American citizens, but as we're very lucky to be. In this country, we have rights and freedoms not found elsewhere, but we still have a ways to go. Yeah, of course we do.
Yeah. I feel like, you know, my mother was one of the few mothers when I was growing up that was working, and I always asked her one time, I said, why did you become a nurse? She was a nurse.
And my mom was a nurse.
Yeah, and Mom said, well, I had three options. I could be a nurse, I could be a teacher, or I could be a secretary. Mm-hmm. So I chose one of those three. And she says that kind of off, you know, tongue in cheek, but mm-hmm. when you think about that period, you know,
absolutely.
That was their options at
absolutely.
That particular time in the 70s and 80s. So
mm-hmm.
Tuesday, where do you think we are? We're making progress? Are we where we were 30 years ago? Are we backsliding in any way?
Well, I must say that my grandmother who raised me, her mother was a manager in the 1950s, which is pretty unheard of. She helped to manage a grocery store. And my grandmother was a very complex woman, and she told me I could be anything I want to be, and I can do anything a man could do except pee standing up. And however, she believed that I should still know my place as a woman. and which meant when I get a husband, know how to cook, you know. So I would say I think that I would agree a lot with what Andy has to say, that I am blessed to be an American woman, and we have a lot of rights that a lot of women don't. Do I think there's room for improvement? Always. There's always room for improvement. But I am raising a daughter, and the one thing I do not do is ever tell her what she cannot do. I never say that to any woman, any young lady. I work with youth all the time, and I wouldn't dare say that, oh, you'll never get paid as much as a man. I'm not telling her that, because I know many women that do. And I will never say to a young woman, you cannot be a mother if you're a single mom. I don't think you should be a single mother, but if you are, you can still have a beautiful life. So I do think that there are things that we could get better at. But I'm thankful to be a woman in America. I'm not trying to sound country when I say that, but listen.
We don't mean to sound country, Eliot.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm not trying to sound country when I say that, but I'm proud to be an American, and I'm proud to be a West Virginia woman, because I just think we're made different. Like, we're just we're just cut different on the cloth.
Sure.
Very
Absolutely.
much so.
Very
And we come from places. Andy says a holler, it is a holler, but
Logan County.
yeah, you come from Southern West Virginia, and you come from Charleston or wherever.
Strong women.
Yeah, but we're just cut different. We can chuck corn and sew a dress.
Right,
You know, we can love our husbands and still change oil in a car. Like we're the whole package.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
And it seems like
Sorry.
and it seems like what's helped us get to these points that you guys are making is that books like your all's anthology here, Feminine Rising, are helping us have that conversation. And for people that are resistant or think it's not important or think it's not a serious issue, these pieces and these writers and these women and their honesty and their words are helping us have that dialogue. And I wonder if you all feel the same way as you think about your collection now, as it's being read and nationwide, and as you're reading and reading excerpts from it elsewhere. Do you feel like that conversation is happening and that's helping to some degree?
The thing about the word conversation is it takes a give and take, and I do find that that's happening. I really do. Like, we've only done a couple of readings, but people are really curious. Right, Tuesday did a reading at Ohio University, and we were at Taylor Books, and people, women approached me and said, thank you for doing this collection. But then we also had some women online that were like, there are not enough of whatever perspective in this book, or there isn't enough of this, or there isn't enough of that. And it's annoying to work so hard for so many years for free for a book that may not even have been published. We didn't know. And then to have people criticize it, but that's part of the conversation. You know what I mean? Like, to have women have questions about, well, does that represent me in some way, or do I disagree with that, and why, and what does it mean? And we can't evolve as a society if we don't question things and discuss things. And I think it's happening online. People are talking a lot online, so
Good.
It's really exciting.
Excellent. Very good. So how did you find your publisher? You've talked about wondering if this was ever going to see the light of day or get published.
Yeah.
How did you find your publisher for this anthology?
Oh, Lord. We were online. Same way I found a publisher for my first book, the hard way. I had a lot of people that I knew in writing tell me no. I'm like, can you help me out? And they're like, no, Andy, no. I don't have any friends, and I don't have agents. I don't have connections. So I didn't have any connections, so to speak. So I got online, and I did searches and, Broader's Market, those websites and things, and just looked, and then sent out query letters asking, will you please read this? And I think we had 10 places say, I don't even want to read it. And then we had a couple places finally look at it, and then she signed us. And Senran Press is fairly new. They have, I think, a dozen books out. So they're fairly new, but they're woman-owned and woman-run, which we didn't seek that out. It just kind of came to us. But I didn't know if it was ever going to see the light of day.
And in addition to this outstanding collection, Andy, you have a novel that's in progress, Native Trees.
Yep.
As we mentioned, excerpts of that was a finalist in still the Journal's 2019 fiction contest. So where do you stand on that novel and publication, and where are you in that process?
The same place we all end up. You're a writer, you know this. I worked on it since 2014, started it around the same time, and just finished it, I guess, a year ago, and just finished the copy editing. And it's ready to go, and I'm begging agents to look at it. And of course, getting told no, like we do, over and over. And it took years to get my first novel published, and I don't care how long it takes, I'm gonna keep working on it because I think it has merit. It's about Buffalo Creek, West Virginia, my hometown, a modern day interpretation. You know, most Appalachian novels are about the past, and I wanted to write something about now, and I did. And I think it'll find a home. So I was going to keep looking, banging on doors, and getting them slammed.
And as many writers have told us on this program before, it's all about persistence and not giving up and keeping at it.
My friend Ace Bogus, he always said, Andy, it's about finding the right editor in the right mood on the right day.
That's right. There is something
True.
for perfect timing. You're
There
exactly
really
right.
is.
Absolutely.
When you don't have connections. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely true.
Maybe I'll have some now. I don't know.
So Tuesday, how about you? What are you working on writing-wise? Are you submitting elsewhere? Are you working on anything else, a longer project, or what are you working on?
Well, it's really funny that I didn't know about really submitting poems to magazines and stuff until I met Andy. Like, Andy was like, why don't you submit poems? And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. They're not that good. I mean, I enjoy speaking and doing events and stuff, and literally in a year, I've published 4 poems, and along with Feminine Rising, but in other literary magazines, which I was completely floored that it happened. I was like, holy cow. And I have a collection right now called Tomboy Blues, and it's 11 poems, and it's about my childhood and about the crazy characters in my childhood. And I am working on my first real, I guess all of them are real, but my first proud, good, academic type manuscript called Fruit of Eye. And I'm really pumped about that.
Good.
And hopefully I'm going to stay persistent, and the poems I've been getting published are the poems that are in that book, which is pretty awesome and very unexpected for me. It's kind of like gave me a kick in the butt. It was like, yeah, go ahead, girl.
Good.
So it made me feel good, and I'm going to keep going.
Excellent.
So.
So in our final moments with you today, ladies, if someone wants to get in contact with either one of you to talk about your writing or what you're working on, or to talk to you about the pieces that you have in the anthology, how can they get in contact with both of you? And also, where can they get copies of Feminine Rising? So Andy, we'll start with you.
Feminine Rising is, you can get it at any bookstore, walk in, any bookstore. You can look for it online. It's all over online. You can get it from my own website, which is how to get a hold of me. Incidentally, it's hollergirl.com, because it's easy to remember. Holler as in HOLLER, like the hollow, not yelling. Holler. And Tuesday's website is I'mTuesdayTaylor.com. So we tried to go easy remembering the stuff. Is that all you asked me? I always get, okay, I ramble.
Yeah, you did great. You
That's what
both
I
did
do.
great. And speaking of great, this collection is great. Feminine
Thank
Rising,
you.
Voices of Power and Invisibility. We've been talking about this outstanding collection, edited by Andrea Fekete and Lara Lillibridge, also with a foreword by Amy Hudock. And Andy, thanks for coming on the program. Tuesday, thanks for coming on to talk to us about your contribution to the anthology. It's a wonderful book, and I think everybody needs to read it. Single women, single men, women in relationships, men in relationships. It's got a lot of power and a lot of personal storytelling that needs to be read and discussed and have that conversation. So congratulations, all your hard work paid off. It was wonderful. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on to talk about it.
Thank you.
We also want to take a moment to say thanks to the staff and management of the Inner Geek for providing our on-site support and assistance today. We encourage you to come down to the Inner Geek and pick up a copy of Feminine Rising. We also want to remind you that many of the other author editors and publishers we've had featured on the program have their works for sale right here at the Inner Geek. So come on down to Pullman Square, inquire about Feminine Rising, and get any other reading taste that you have satisfied right here at the Inner Geek. And we appreciate their support and assistance each and every episode of Chapters. If you want to stay in contact and up to date with what's going on here on the program, we've made a platform or several platforms available to you to do so. One of those is through email. Our email address is right here at the bottom of the screen. We do ask that you please put your name and include the town or community in which you're writing from so that we can keep track of that correspondence. If you like to watch programming on YouTube, we have a Chapters page through the Armstrong One Wire page on YouTube, and that address is right here at the bottom of the screen. From there, just click on the Chapters tab, and we have all of our author, editor, and publisher interviews archived for you there as well. And we also have a presence on Facebook. Our Facebook page address is right here at the bottom of the screen. What you'll see on the Facebook page is our more recent interviews archived there, and you can like those, you can reshare those to your page or any other page, personal or professional, that you have associated with Facebook. So if you like Facebook, if you like YouTube, if you like email, we've made it possible for you to stay in contact with the program through one of those social media platforms. And that will do it for us this time on Chapters, but please come again next time, and in the meantime, stay tuned to this station for news and views that impact you and your community.